Yes, you've talked about the background, how you came out, how you stood on the SheDecide. For real, it was good, but now we are here, young people. How are you involving us to make the movement move? Because my doctor, I think she's Dr. The lady near you, yes, the oldest lady, she talked of leaving the gap for young people. Fine, you're leaving a gap for us, but you're not creating, you're not involving us, you're not engaging us. You engage us in every step you're doing, so that will also be on the front page, in order for giving right information and right deliverance. Thank you.
And then there was one more here, and we'll bring it back to the panelists before I take more other comments from the floor.
Thank you so much. My name is Honorable Masaki Samuel. I'm a former Member of Parliament aspirant Embakasi South 2019 by-election, and I'm here just to represent the young people and the voice of young people. I think what I've got from across all this conversation is basically how are we going to implement, because we have had all these discussions on how are we going to implement these policies in the grassroots so that this can be effective. It's not just going to be conversation at the global level where there's nothing that is happening in our countries. Because we talk about universal human rights, but this is not reflecting in our countries. It is just here on the global platforms, but it's not reflective. So these governments need to commit in their own countries that they're going to implement these universal human rights, not just in these forums, and it's nothing that is happening. Then one challenge that has come across is the implementation. We do so much talking, but nothing reflects in our countries. My question is, as we come out of this forum today, are we going to take back to our countries and to our government to implement these global actions? Thank you so much.
Panelists, I'm coming back to you, but I think with all the comments that's being shared, we're hearing a lot of issues still on youth inclusion. Are we really being brought to the table? Are we really being involved? When it comes to movements, for example, SheDecides, how do we ensure that everyone's involved? And I think more questions on implementation as well. How do we ensure that what we're saying, actually has results and we're seeing change? And yeah, you have a list of questions that we need to make sure we give the right answers, to make sure when we go out, we are all drivers of change. I think to re-emphasize on all the questions that came, that it's not everyone here who have the solutions, it's all of us in this room who we need to start thinking about the solutions and how we can be drivers of change. So start thinking about that, because that's going to be my next question to the audience. But let's start with you, Mali.
Just very briefly, I don't think that this meeting alone will make a huge difference. But it's one after the other. If you look 25 years back, we had a number of global meetings that were then translated into local realities. And how do you do that? Not everything we talk about it here, and we agree because we are all talking amongst each other. We can have a little bit of disagreements, but basically we are singing the same song, right? But this song is only here, and it's going out a little bit. Now we have to raise our voices, make it stronger, but also implement accountability mechanisms. And what I remember is, as a politician, I was working with IPU, that's the Interparliamentarian Union, with EPF, the European Parliamentarian Forum. And I give you one example. There was a lot of work done in the global level on maternal health. A resolution was, after many years, agreed in Kampala. And at the same time, there was a commitment. So we asked for commitments. All the governments who wanted to commit were writing down commitments. And 2 years later in Hanoi, the governments were asked, the parliamentarians, for example, Uganda said, we are going to hire 500 nurses. 2 years later, they were held accountable. Did you do that? And what was the effect? So it is a slow process, and you one step ahead, push back, but we have to work on the global, the regional, and the local level, and working through all the mechanisms that are available. Advocacy, activism, but also working with all our different constituencies. And one more thing, the more evidence you can bring. It's not about are you for or against abortion. In my whole life, I've never met somebody who says, I'm for abortion, I'm going to be pregnant to abort. I mean, that's not reality. So women get pregnant and it is not the right time, they don't want pregnancy, so it's not being for or against, it is providing evidence that those countries where we have good laws, comprehensive sexuality education, access to family planning, they are the best in the world class. They have the lowest number of unplanned, unwanted pregnancies. So we have to be able to provide the evidence and to pack the evidence that it is kind of we have to translate it to politicians, to media, to religious leaders, to the grassroots, but work with evidence. Involve your academics and try to get your activism driven by, or at least fed by evidence.
I think, this is a dialogue, so feel free to just grab the mic and share.
Grabbed it. I love what you said on the same side, and I think that's wonderful, and this maybe will respond to a couple of questions. We're on the same side, which is great, but it's also terrible because we're so good at speaking to each other and speaking to everybody who agrees that we're not doing enough to speak to the people who might not agree, and that's not a very easy job. So when we talk about things like inclusion, youth engagement, leadership, rights, diversity, equality, all of those things, we're speaking to each other, we all nod in agreement, and it's great. I mean, I speak to audiences of several thousand, and everybody says, fantastic. And I think, wow, what if I was speaking to several thousand that didn't agree with me? I'd be in a lot of trouble. I'd have to change all my tactics. So I want to say that. And about youth, I think that there's something about the language we use. I hear a lot of people say future leaders, and I think that's not right. I think you're already leaders in your own right. And so that needs to be kind of integrated in the way that we speak. Thank you so much, current leaders. I'm ready to retire. You just tell me when. It's also about, part of the challenge is that, the oldies, since I'm the oldest in the room, right? Was I designated the oldest in the room? Which is, I love that. We get invited to a lot of things, and it's our responsibility to say, okay, I understand that there's experience, and experience has value, but it's our job to say, I'm bringing somebody else with me. It's about sharing that space. It's about recognizing, yes, everybody has a voice, but not everybody has a microphone. And if I've got this thing in my hand, then I have a responsibility to use it well. So also pass that microphone. There's one other thing I want to say, just as a final thought. There's a mosquito up here that's been biting all of us. Now, I only say this because that mosquito has been incredibly effective in making us all pay attention. One bite, maybe 2 bites. By the 3rd bite, we're all annoyed and we're all focused on the mosquito. So I'm sincerely hoping that we all learn that tactic and be like the mosquito in the room and just keep biting and biting and biting until somebody pays attention, because eventually they will. I mean, there's a massive lesson to be learned from this, because that is the way that we're going to make change and get people to pay attention to what we're saying. 1 or 2 bites and they might not know, but you just suck all the blood out of them, eventually they're going to pay attention for sure. I think, who killed the mosquito? All right, the mosquito is dead. Okay.
Hi, so just first specifically around women and disability, this was really important in the referendum in Ireland. Because, and we say we're speaking on the same side, I don't always assume that, because there's a lot of effort often to divide people, and we can never be complacent about that politics of division. There was an attempt, for example, to talk about people with disability and to say, use them as an argument, for example, against access to abortion. But what was really important is that women with a disability said, no, we are actors, we are ourselves agents, and we need reproductive rights as women. And they were very strong, and there was a group who formed who made their voice heard in the referendum, and was really important. Around the question of who we bring, and this leader, I don't know that leaders are just responding to what people want, because I think politically we need to sometimes start the debate or reframe a debate or bring a different perspective in and give spaces and open spaces. For me, for example, one small thing that I do is I work with the Secondary School Union of Ireland, and it's something, a really good idea. They're effectively high school students who form a union so that they get their voice. They are pre-voting age, but they get their voice into political, and we bring them to the political discussion. And they are pushing, for example, for vote at 16. I think that's important. And we can create those spaces, and those of us who can, must. But this is a caution note, I would say, to youth advocates. Do not simply wait for the spaces you are invited into. Do not be put into the cul-de-sac. Do not be only consulted on the issue that they want just your opinion on. You need to do two things to bring your discussion to whichever level it is. So if it's a decision in your local level and they say, actually, this decision is made by the Department of Health, you find your way to the Department of Health to get your message to that. And you channel where the decision is made and demand to be heard at that level. If you're in a room where you think you have an important agenda point and it's not on the meeting agenda, that's like the mosquito, you put the topic on the agenda, and you may have to do it 5 times. So you need to set, for example, in Ireland, the change we had in Ireland was constitutional, because the Constitution's meant to reflect people's lives. It's meant to be owned by the people. So there shouldn't be a limit to the space of where the change can happen. Around accountability, I think it's really important. Accountability and implementation. And that's why the Sustainable Development Goals are really useful, because we have a common language around what is being delivered. So we can help each other. So, for example, if it's not being delivered in Guatemala, I can, as Ireland and Irish activists, can help support that. We have a common language around our ambition for humanity, and that allows us to talk about accountability in a different way and to amplify the battles for accountability at a local level in each place. And the last thing I just want to say, I think the reality point that you made, the real experiences and the real lives, placing reality and reality of experience all the time alongside goals and alongside ambitions, and having that test reflected is something really, really strong that we can do in terms of it is the ultimate test of accountability. So there are a few things I think. I have one thing which I was meant to do. I had a job which I failed to do, which was to introduce our brilliant chair. And I want to instead just give a thank you to you. So our chair is Tikala Etaye. She's a lawyer in Malawi. She's doing amazing work on sexual and reproductive health and rights. She is a media voice. She's done documentaries on HIV and gender-based violence, on the 21st generation. She's the former president of AFRIAN, which is one of the most important networks of youth voices right across this continent of young people in Africa. So apologies I didn't introduce her, and maybe a quick thank you to her also.
You know, Senator Alice, what you did was actually very profound, because when we're talking about bringing young people in the space, it's really acknowledging them, and she did that. And I'm a young leader, and it's a profound thing that she did, because when leaders come together, sometimes you have young people in the room, but they'll be like, oh, we have young people in the room. It's like, no. You have young professionals that are here to give inputs and that, and you need to be acknowledged. And I think just wanting to hear from the 25s by 25s and just the questions of inclusion, because you guys have been doing fantastic work, and it's what's being spoken here. It's about how do you take the initiative? How do you claim your space? Because these things already affect you. You know, just a quick one. If you're African, you know, in a village, when your house is on fire, you don't stand and watch your house burn down. You get the sand, you get the water, you bring people in the community and make sure that fire is gone. And I think that's what we need to learn to do. Don't watch things burn down and be like, oh no, you know. Do something, take action, and make sure the fire is gone and the challenges are gone. But a few words from the 25s by 25s about just inclusion. What can you say to your fellow young peers, especially with the movements that you guys are already leading with She Decides and the local movements and the open mics?
So one thing that I can suggest to other young leaders is that use your privilege. Each of us has some sort of privilege, whether it's me being a Sinhala Buddhist woman, which is the majority in my country. I can create a space for a minority when I'm asked to come to the table. Never think of being called to the spot as tokenism. That's your responsibility. If you're being invited to a space, don't reject it. Use it. Whether you're the token or not, it doesn't matter. Use that space, use your privilege, and make sure that if it's a conversation on PL-HIV and you're not a person living with HIV, push through and make sure at the next meeting you say, hey, I want experience, not me. That's how you can include more people. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Humble so that they can learn, and also not to be lazy to look for information. No one will ever give you all the information. We do have the chance of having internet. Let's go to the internet. Let's look for information so that we are sure of what we are saying, because when we go to the villages to sensitize people, for you to be there, you have to give them the right information, because going to tell them that you need to use this and then leave. Once I saw a young people saying that they are not responsible for the pregnancy because they used the condom, but he had used it twice. He used it, washed it, and then used it again. So you see, this is just an issue of information. So when we go to the ground, we have to have the right information to share with the people. The information and capacitation is what we need as young people.
First, I disagree a little bit with the thing about the responsible of youth people, because I can see a lot of youth people here in the Nairobi Summit, and also I just can see the news every day, and there's thousands of youth people or millions of youth people leading movements around the world, on the streets, and that's true, first. And also, I need to mention that there is not also youth people. There's also women leading that movements. I remember, for example, in Lebanon, women on the streets leading that movement. In Argentina, women going to the streets to say, we want to get access to safe abortion. So I think we are responsible. And also, I think something that maybe we can think about it as youth leaders is that we also need to change the narratives about some of the discussions that we are having. I think, for example, taking the topic about abortion, I think there's a lot of years, a lot of people talking about abortion is good or not. But at this time, we need to stop to have these kind of discussions, because abortion is a reality. We can spend more time about it. Also about LGBTIQ rights, there's a lot of people talking about if we are good or not good. We exist. We need rights. We are not waiting for your acceptance. We are waiting for our rights or recognition.
One of the most simplest things that we can all do come Thursday, come Friday, even right now, live tweeting, is spreading that awareness, bringing it back to our home country. I think why ICPD mattered was because it was actually the women in country who were represented in Cairo that brought it back and put it into their programs and implemented what their governments promised, right? And I think going back to my Ugandan sister, it's about changing that narrative, and She Decides gives that platform to simplify, right? To put a face to that image. We're not just talking about an enabling environment in which the ICPD program of action put a framework towards and put pillars and examples, and they express to decriminalize laws and to increase access. It's putting that image on the most vulnerable that you have mentioned, and to ensure that she not only has laws that are not restricting her from accessing those services, she's not faced by stigma of providers, she's not withheld from her father from leaving the house, but it starts within herself to feel that she has the right to decide and that it is her human right and her innate nature, and she's equipped with those skills to be able to understand that. So I think that's one thing, like Lena said, to not just continue talking to people in this room, but to talk to those people, simplify the narrative, and spread awareness around what governments have committed here yet again today, and to say in reality what that means to that small girl.
Just one last point. I want to address the point about implementation made by the Member of Parliament behind us. So in my day-to-day job, besides being an ambassador, I'm organizing the Beijing Plus 25 Forum, which will take place next year in 2020, both in Mexico and in Paris. And I want to talk about the forum because we're very much focused on implementation. So we'll be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform and Declaration. But the way we designed the forum, again in Mexico in May 2020 and then in Paris early July 2020, and everybody's invited of course, is that we sort of turn things upside down. Instead of having organizations, international organizations, countries, states, governments, and different kind of stakeholders coming to the conference and being asked at the conference to make a national commitment, which we know always gives way to a lot of struggling and fighting, and then there's a watered down statement and everybody's disappointed and so on and so on. We decided to revert the process. So what we'll be launching in Paris next year is a number of action coalitions. As you understand it, there's a known action in the action coalitions. Each of the action coalitions will be gathering states, private sector organizations, NGOs, international organizations around one issue, one theme, and I believe there's a good chance that SRHR and health will be one of the themes, but there are other themes. And in order for heads of states and leaders to be present in Paris, they have to make the commitment to engage in the coalition before they come to Paris, which means they make a commitment to mobilize funds, they make a commitment to implement programs, they make a commitment to make at least one national commitment pertaining to the themes of the coalitions. And only if they have made these commitments in the months coming up to the forum in Paris are they invited in Paris. So once they're in Paris, there's actually no negotiations to be held, because if they're in Paris, they have met their commitment. And it's not a commitment which they will not be held accountable to, because UN Women is the convener of that forum, France and Mexico co-hosting, co-chairing, and they're making this commitment in front of the international community. So I think it's also, we talk about these, we have these summits, it's huge conversations, it's nice with panels with everybody agrees, all very progressive. But it's important to make sure that once we arrive to the conversations, as you say, we hold accountable the countries and governments, including my own, the French government. So that's why we decided to turn things upside down. So everybody, please come to Paris and to Mexico next year. It will be a huge celebration. We're expecting more than 5,000 people in Paris. We have a huge youth representation actually on our steering committee or civil society advisory group. Youth make more than 1/3 of the members of all of the steering committees. So they're really, inclusive process. And again, the leaders you will see in Paris that will have made a commitment for implementation.
Perfect. And I'm looking at my time. I wanted to take more comments from the floor, but unfortunately I won't be able to do that. But quick things, we're going to end with the panel just giving one word of just reflections on everything that has been spoken about. It was supposed to be one sentence, but I think it's more powerful when you can say, from 10 years from now, what is that one word that comes to your mind in terms of just things that need to happen? So I'm gonna go around in that, but there will be a lot more conversations continuing from here, and I think it's time that we realize that we in this room, not only the ones that we're talking here, that we are the drivers of change, and also learning to work with one another, irrespective if you're younger or older generation. I think it's just about partnership with everyone, people with disabilities, indigenous people, LGBTI, having to come in a room with our diversity and learning to work with one another, age-related, sex-related. And I think that's a key message, that we need to make sure that everyone leaves a room knowing that you're a change maker. and you're going to take out something from here to do something about it. But over to my panel here from both sides. I think we started with you, Senator, but we'll start from this side. In one word, in the next 10 years, what is it for you? Ruben?
I think I lost.
Just one word. In the next 10
Justice.
years.
Justice.
Justice.
Equity.
Responsibility.
2 words, accountability and partnerships.
Fearless. Empathy.
Dignity.
2 words, intersectional and international.
1 word, partnership, and go be change makers, because I can have the floor and end up with a full sentence to congratulate and thank everyone who's been able to join us for the past 2 hours.
Isn't She Decides 1 word?
She decides. Thank you everyone for joining the session.
Because I was like, that was my job, but then I finished my speech and I sat down.
Baraka zake hazikuishi, si kama binadamu abadiliki. Ananipenda leo kuliko jana, kuliko jana, kuliko jana. Yesu nipende leo kuliko jana, kuliko jana, kuliko jana. Yesu nipende leo kuliko jana. Na kuomba Mungu uwasamehe, wangalijua jinsi unavyonipenda mimi wasingenisema. Na maadui wangu na waombe maisha marefu, wazidi kukuona ukinibariki. Ujue binadamu ni watu wa ajabu sana, walimkana Yesu mara 3 kabla jogoo kuwika. Ujue binadamu ni watu wa ajabu sana, walimsulubisha Yesu Masia bila kusita. Oh, na Bwana ni Mwokozi wangu, tena ni kiongozi wangu, ananipenda leo tena ni mkombozi wangu. Ananipenda leo kuliko jana. Baraka zake hazikuishi, si kama binadamu abadiliki. Ananipenda leo kuliko jana, kuliko jana, kuliko jana. Pende leo kuliko jana.
Utanipa jakalaro, nipe mimi kwengine, we useme no. Shinde ibilisi kwenye kichwa chako. Ni mwenzako mkiwa baba, mkiwa wa mapenzi baba. Usinione nalia sana, nalilia mapenzi. Ni mwenzako mkiwa baba, mkiwa wa mapenzi baba. Usinione nalia sana, nalilia mapenzi. Niambia, si nitarithia baba, hata ukiwa mbali nitasubiria. Basi nogeshe, nogeshe baby, nogeshe, ninogeshe, ninogeshe baby, baby nogeshe. Raha, raha tupu kupendana na wewe, raha tupu. Presha kupanda kushuka kisa nini?